Sarah Dowie.
I move that the question be now put.
Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, thank you. This is my first contribution in this debate, and we're in part 3 of the bill, and I want to address my remarks to clauses 65(3), 86A and 120. Before I do want to, given that it is my first contribution, I do want to acknowledge the family members who spoke on Tuesday night in Parliament and who are in our thoughts as we speak today, and all of the family members and friends and work colleagues of those who are listening and watching this debate at home with heavy hearts as they see what should be a very important piece of legislation, a landmark piece of legislation, turned into a much reduced and watered down piece of legislation. It is incumbent, Mr. Chair, on each one of us in elected representatives to do our solemn duty on this bill, the duty that we pledge when we take up office as elected members, and those duties are to represent our constituents, truly represent our constituents, and to strive for the best and fairest outcomes in law. Unfortunately, this piece of legislation doesn't do that, and sadly we cannot support it. With regards, when the Minister gave his introductory remarks to part 3, he described this as being I think it was the meat and drink of the legislation, a rather odd phrase, but I think I know what he meant. But then he proceeded to talk about nuanced approaches and sensible and balanced approaches, which were really code for watering down. And going to 65.3, this is, as my colleague Megan Woods said before, this is the essence of why we are opposing this bill, because of the cap that's being put on workplaces and because of the exclusion of high-risk industries such as agriculture. Before I address that, I'd just like to take issue with one of the things that the Minister did say in his introductory remarks, which is where he said that he has been able to find no correlation between the presence of health and safety representatives in workplaces and the prevention of death and injury in workplaces, which I find an extraordinary thing to say. And I just want to give an example in a bit close to home for the Minister and myself is in Dunedin Hospital, of a work and safety representative, an elected work and safety representative in the hospital theatres, who managed to have the courage to speak out publicly about the very serious issues within those hospital theatres that were creating risk every day for the workforce and for patients in that hospital. And it was her courage in speaking out publicly that managed to really crack that issue open and get some real movement in that hospital in terms of getting some of the repair work that's being done. Clearly there's a lot more to be done and there's a lot more issues. But she was an elected and is an elected representative, a health and safety representative. She's a nurse. She represents an industry that spends its whole time caring for people, but she had the courage to speak out because she knew that her position was one that was elected and that had some weight in law and in that workplace. And Mr. Chair, the Minister's fatuous statement around no correlation existing is, I think, one of the great travesties in the debate on this issue. Turning to clause 65(3), the creative accounting as I'd like to call it, from the former accountant in the Minister, of the exclusion of agriculture as a high-risk industry is again one of the most extraordinary things in this bill. And to give that some context, in my own region, Mr Chair, I asked for the figures and managed to get only the figures and the descriptions for the last 3 years for the workplace fatalities in Otago and Southland, since 2013. And of those 20 fatalities, Mr Chair, 13 of them are agriculture. 13, Mr Chair.
Mr Chair.
Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much.